this happened today, maybe we would know where she is as far as a paper trail, credit card trail, surveillance camera, something. But in this time that we are speaking of, she just disappeared. Almost as if she never existed. It's quite strange. Let's get into this case. And thank you so much to Aaron for this suggestion. Joan Risch was born Joan Carolyn Bard in Brooklyn, New York on May 12th, 1930. Her parents' names are Harold and Josephine Bard, and by the age of 8, Joan and her family moved to Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, where in February 1939 her parents sadly died in a fire. The fire was later described as suspicious, although an investigation was ultimately inconclusive, and the local fire chief deemed it accidental. Joan was visiting relatives in Brooklyn at the time. She then went to live with her maternal aunt and her husband, who formally adopted her. Joan took their last name as her own and applied for a social security number as Joan Nitrous. It was later reported that Joan told an acquaintance that she was being abused, or that she had been abused as a child by her stepfather. She graduated from Wilson College in Jamesburg, Pennsylvania in 1952, and she had a degree in English literature. Joan went to work in the publishing industry after college, and she started as a secretary and later moved to supervise the secretarial pool, and went on to become an editorial assistant at Hardcourt Braves and World, and later Thomas Y. Crowell Company. In 1956, she married an executive at one of the companies, Martin Risch, and left work to raise a family with him. Living in Richfield, Connecticut, Joan and Martin had their first child, Lillian. The year after their wedding, they had a son named David. And in April 1961, they moved to Lincoln, Massachusetts. When I was a kid, I used to pronounce it as Massachusetts. And they lived outside of Boston, where they easily integrated into the community. Joan became active in the League of Women Voters, while Martin pursued a career with the paper company. Joan spoke of becoming a teacher after the children got older. So, let's fast forward a little bit to when Joan disappeared. Now, at this time, Joan is 31 years old. had her son Douglas, also aged 4, over to play with Lillian. During the time that they were there, they observed Joan came in and out to prune some plants and put the shears she had used back in the garage. Shortly before 2 p.m., Joan came out again and took the children back across the street to Barbara's house. She told the 2 kids that she would be back. Lillian later told the police that she did not see anyone else in the area at the time. She and her brother Douglas played on a swing set from which they could not see their home or Joan or around the home. At around 2:15 p.m., Barbara briefly saw Joan wearing what she thought was a trench coat over her clothing, and she was moving quickly up her driveway, carrying something red with outstretched arms. At the time, she assumed that Joan was chasing one of the children, which proved to be the last time that Joan was confirmed to be seen. An hour later, Virginia Keene, the daughter of one of the neighbors, got off of the school bus, and as she neared her home, she recalled seeing an unfamiliar car, possibly a General Motors model, which was dirty and two-tone, with one of the colors being blue. 5 minutes later, another nearby resident said they stopped while driving up Old Bedford Road to let a car back out of either Virginia's or Joan's driveway. Both Virginia and her mother said that there was no car in their driveway at that time. Barbara took Lillian back to her home at 3:40 p.m., intending to take her children out on a shopping trip with her. Believing Joan was still in the house she just left, and when she returned at 4:15 p.m., Lillian came back to Barbara's house, telling Barbara, "Mommy is not here, she's gone, and the kitchen is covered with red paint." Lillian's baby brother was found in his crib, and his diaper needed to be changed. He was crying. After Barbara went to Joan's house herself to verify that what Lillian was saying, was true, she called the police at 4:33 p.m. Sergeant Mike of the Lincoln Police Department arrived within 5 minutes. After talking with Barbara, he went into Joan's house. In the kitchen, he found bloody smears on the walls, an overturned table, and the handset of the wall-mounted telephone ripped loose and thrown into the waste basket, which had been taken from its usual place under the sink and left in the middle of the floor. Mike believed Joan unalived Also in the house was her pocketbook. Investigators determined that after her purchases, since cashing the check the previous evening, she would have had less than $10, which would be $102 today, left. Okay, so there were some She said that despite how bloody it looked, the total bloodshed amounted to merely half a pint, which would have suggested that it was not a life-threatening injury. Now, after Joan's disappearance, there was a reporter named Serene, and Serene found very interesting evidence with Joan that made it seem as if this was a plan, something that was planned over time. Let me tell you about it. So, she went to the town's public library to research similar cases as a background, and in one of the books she perused, it was about the purported disappearance of Brigham Young's 27th wife. She saw that Joan had checked this book out in September, which was a month before she disappeared. There was another book in thin air about a woman who, like Joan, had left behind blood smears and a towel when she went missing. Serene again found Joan's signature on the checkout card. Serene reported her findings in the newspaper. A group of library volunteers who looked through records found that Joan, who was a regular book borrower, had taken out 25 books over the summer of 1961, many of which also had to do with murders and missing persons cases. Based on this, Serene and her colleagues at the newspaper believed Joan might have staged the apparent crime scene and disappeared voluntarily. Martin continued to live in the same house and raise his children. He never once declared his wife as legally dead, and he himself died in 2009 at the age of 79 years old. Martin rarely talked about this case in his later years, and he believed that his wife was indeed very much alive, and he said perhaps she had some sort of amnesia episode or some other psychological break and had forgotten how to return home. However, Joan had no history of mental illness, and it's never been reported in her family. I did see somewhere that it was thought that Joan was looking for a way to escape her life, that she was kind of tired of her life, and this was her way to escape and possibly start a new life. It's baffling. It's very, very baffling because there were no red flags or signs that she was unhappy, and in fact, friends and people that knew her refuted this claim and said that no, she seemed very content in her life. Like I said earlier, she was planning on becoming a teacher. So it's like, why would you just disappear? But then again, she disappeared the day that her husband was out of town, which does seem quite convenient. And if there was foul play involved, wouldn't there have been a scream of some kind? The door was kind of open, the neighbors are coming back and forth. She indeed was within earshot, so if somebody attacked consciousness and lost consciousness, and there was some kind of construction going on in the area. And perhaps she fell into one of the dig sites and was buried there, but this seems